Yes, welcome into sportsBIT. Betting Inside today, Pauly and Teddy, Monday, March 13th. Oh, huge show coming up. The madness is here. Deep dive, we'll look at the line moves already with the tournament. Of course, big game breakdown, a loaded show coming up. Of course, we start with the brackets and what the committee did. And snubs, Teddy, seedings, what they got wrong, what they got right. I'll start here, Teddy. It's a bad day for the mid-majors again. I do not count the Atlantic 10 as a mid-major. So this year, one at-large bid for a mid-major, St. Mary's. Last year, 2. That is a disturbing trend, Teddy, and you should be concerned if you're a college basketball fan that it's all about the power conference teams.
Well, I mean, what's happened is the power conference teams have gotten more powerful. The power conferences themselves have gotten more powerful, hence the fewer at-large bids. I mean, I don't want to hear you bitching if you're Cal or if you're Iowa or if you're Syracuse. I mean, the committee even said, why isn't Syracuse there? Well, they didn't win any road games. It wasn't just road games for Syracuse. What did they lose? They lost at home to Georgetown and St. John's by 40 points. They should have even been in the discussion as far as I'm concerned. But if you want to talk a legit snub, I think Illinois State is there. The Redbirds are the one team that absolutely got screwed when it comes to being in the dance or not being in the dance. Now, seeding's another story entirely. But the only complaint for a team that didn't get in that I have is Illinois State. But when Wichita got a 10 seed, you knew the Redbirds were getting an at-large bid.
Yep, you're right about that. That's troubling. More on that coming up. But the last 4 bubble teams all from power conferences. And here's another trick that they like to pull with the committee. They match up these small schools against each other so they eliminate when someone's knocked out early. You see how St. Mary's plays VCU and Creighton plays Rhode Island? Give me a break.
Sure, and it's not only that. I mean, it's up and down the line. You can see how they set up the match. But again, they're interested. Don't ever think for a minute that the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee or anyone else in the NCAA is interested in anything other than one thing. Dollars, okay? It's about TV ratings. It's about generating the matchups that not the fans are interested in, but the casual viewer, the not so much college basketball fans. They know we're all watching anyway, all right? The matchups they're trying to set up are not the mid-major of the world. They want the marquee matchups that attract the casual, once-in-a-while fans that'll tune in for it. And that's the truth of it. It comes down to money, Pauly, and that's, not much we're going to do about it. And that's not our job to do anything about it. Our job is to handicap and look at point spreads and try to figure out where the best value is, where the most value is when it comes to the NCAA tournament. You can bitch at the committee every year. They're a bunch of idiots. But it is what it is. The bottom line is it's our job to sift through the nonsense and concentrate on what's important. That's why we do sportsBIT, to try to give you the type of info you're not going to find on other shows when it comes to what really matters in the big dance.
For years, I said they would put the right teams in, but didn't know how to seed. Well, now it's both, and I know they've had no clue when it came to seeding. And there's some egregious mistakes they made yesterday. First and foremost, Wichita State. Pomeroy had them a top 10 team. They're in the top 20 in the polls. 10 seed.
I mean, this is probably an all-timer when you talk about bad seeding. I mean, the betting world versus a committee from the get-go. All right. 1 hour after the pairings are announced, the number 10 seed, Wichita State, opens minus 6.5 over the number 7 seed, Dayton. I mean, Greg Martin probably literally had to feel like shooting the committee members. That is one of the really seeding. But everyone's talking about Wichita State. That's not the only bad seeding, Paulie. There's half a dozen at least.
SMU is 6. Give me a break. They're 30-4. They won the American title. They've won 26 of their last 27 games, and the only loss was by 2 on the road against Cincinnati. Vandy, a 9? 15 losses. Give me a break. They lost by 20 to Missouri. So what? You beat Florida 3 times. Middle Tennessee at 12. They're 30-4. 30-4. You know what they did last year? They upset Michigan State in the first round. They also beat Vandy by 23 points. They also beat Wilmington and went to Ole Miss and won. I cannot believe they're at 12. That's ridiculous. Baylor at 3. Come on, give me a break.
Yeah. But again, some of this stuff can prove valuable for us, okay? Here's an SMU team that is clearly underseeded, okay? And then you have SMU guard Sterling Brown. Here's the quote. we're just going to have to prove them wrong now. We're better than a 6 seed. And of course, we agree with that. But the funny thing, when you see, let's see, the 12 seed middle beat the 9 seed Vanderbilt by 23 points earlier in the season. And this year's middle team's every bit as good as last year's Blue Raiders squad, the one that beat Michigan State. But again, there's so many of these. Look, Sparty comes in as a 9. They're a dog to Miami. Look at Baylor's only 12 against New Mexico State from the god-awful WAC conference. It's the point spreads are the great equalizer. The point spreads will tell you where the committee got it wrong. And when you look at a point spread like, Minnesota -1 against Middle Tennessee State. And here's 8-9 matchup. Wisconsin -5.5 or -6 against Virginia Tech. That's the highest 8-9 matchup point spread that I can remember. Paul, can you think of one higher than that, where these two teams are supposed to be even, and there's a 6-point differential on a neutral? That doesn't happen every year.
I was watching it with you yesterday, and it ticked me off. I said, wait a second. USC and Providence played last year in the tournament. Why are they playing again? Well, they screwed something up, and they had to move things.
Well, it wasn't screw up. That there were a bunch of issues when it came to travel. Originally, the committee had Providence playing Wake and USC playing Kansas State, but a Providence play-in win would have met a matchup with Creighton in a 6 versus 11 seed game, and that's considered the first round, and teams from the same conference can't face off in the first round, so they had to switch the matchups and send Providence to play USC and Kansas State to play Wake. And then they had to make sure that USC was playing on Wednesday in Dayton instead of on Tuesday because the Trojans were coming from the West Coast. And the same was true of the UC Davis, the number 16 seed. So, there were a bunch of issues. And there's going to be issues with travel as well. There's this giant winter storm pending in the Northeast. Whoever's going to be playing in Buffalo, looking like they're going to be traveling today on Monday. And the teams from the Northeast that are traveling out also likely to leave Monday ahead of the storm and spend an extra day or two in their respective host cities.
All right, let's help people out there filling out their bracket. Couple good notes here. A top 4 seed is lost in the first round 28 of 32 years. A double-digit seed has made the Sweet 16 30 of 32 years. And as Teddy talked about in the deep dive last week, 27 of the last 28 years, the champion's been a 4 seed or better. Now, as far as upsets, this is from ESPN Stats and Info. From 2004 to 2016, 23 teams made the tourney after going undefeated in conference play. 22 of them won a game in the tournament. Since 2009, all 12 teams that made the tournament after going undefeated in conference play won at least one game in the tourney. Who's that this year? Vermont and Princeton. See if they can get it done. What do you have on the 2-15 matchup?
Yeah, although the Ivy League long-term is a terrible point spread record in the tournament, so that's two conflicting trends you're going to find there. I got some good stuff from Mackenzie Kramer, wrote a piece for ESPN.com, and talking about some of the matchups. And there's a 116. I didn't want to go through all of them, but there were a couple that stood out. 2 versus 15. The most even matchup there is against the point spread since 2008. 18 and 18 against the spreads. In 7 of the 9 years, 2 favorites covered and 2 did not. Although the outright upset from the 15 seed has happened much more often of late. It's happened 4 times since 2012 after going 4 and 104 straight up in the first 108 meetings between 2 seeds and 15 seeds. What about 5-12, Pauly? The 5-12 matchup, also another one that people like to talk about for producing upsets, and that's actually played out against the spread. Since 2009, favorites just 11 and 21 ATS in that 5-12 pairing, and a 12 seed has defeated a 5 seed outright 18 times, at least in 18 of the past 21 seasons, and in fact 8 and 8 straight up over the past 4 NCAA tournaments.
All right, tomorrow we run through all the regions, sleeper, team that could go out early, and we'll look at a couple of the play-in games. That's on tomorrow's show. The deep dive today, where the early money came in on the tournament games. Bad beats, bad bets, bad for the books. ESPN Stats and Info, Dwayne Wade minus 37 plus minus in Sunday's loss of the Celtics. Worst plus minus of his career. Bad bet if he had the Bulls, Teddy. This was over early.
It was over in the first quarter. I mean, it was the mother of all bad spots for Boston. And in theory, it was supposed to be the mother of all good spots for Chicago. The fact that that game was over in the first quarter, if there's ever a sell sign on the Bulls, it's blinking loud neon right now. Chicago, a bet against team. And boy, we've already seen that in terms of action for tonight with money pouring in against the Bulls. That was a pretty ugly performance.
Bad beat in point spread hijinks, at least shenanigans with this one, with the injury report. And the Rockets were bet up from 5 to 7. They're up, 9 late. Harden missed some free throws. Cavs hit a 3. In any event, the Rockets have the ball up 5. The Cavs are trying to foul over and over and over again, and they wouldn't call it. Clock runs out.
It was really tough if you had Houston there. And not that they were the right side. It's a coin flip game. But, they're up 5. They're up 9 with 40 seconds left or 50 seconds left. And teams don't come back in the NBA down 9 with 50 seconds left. Doesn't happen. The Harden missed free throw first. So even if you had a good number with Houston, you weren't cashing. And then, they were slapping them all over the place. Refs are like, no, this game's over. It was very bizarre that last foul wasn't called. It made an enormous difference from a point spread perspective. Cleveland gets the money. In the first time all year, the Cavs now 1-21 ATS in games that they lose in straight-up fashion.
What happened there with LeBron and Kyrie out? They're going to play. They're out. What the shenanigans here with these guys, with the injury, or at least with the rest, I mean.
Well, no. At no point did anyone say LeBron and Kyrie are going to sit. The markets bet Houston thinking LeBron and Kyrie might sit, and the Cavs have been sitting guys on the second night of back-to-backs, and Cleveland's been awful on the second night of back-to-backs, et cetera, et cetera. So Houston took all the money because they were betting on the come, and it didn't come, obviously, to fruition.
Bad bets. Pacers bet up from 4 to 6.5. Dragic out from Miami. They win by 4. And Wisconsin, a bad bet. Bet up to 2 against Michigan. What a call by you. You said Michigan either loses and goes out big in the first round of the Big Ten tournament after the accident with the plane, or they win the whole thing. They won the whole thing?
Yeah, the Wolverines, and I was very surprised that the Badgers' money came. And everyone kept on saying, Michigan's going to run out of gas, Michigan's going to run out of gas, Michigan's going to run out of gas. Near-death experience, man. You don't run out of gas for a couple of days, and the Wolverines had a heck of a run last weekend. I'm not so convinced this next weekend is going to be quite so friendly.
Yeah, this is strange, too. They bet Cincinnati, SMU, another easy win. They're a machine. But there was some information out there that maybe SMU didn't care about this tournament, and they almost lost in their first game, where they blew a 25-point lead, and then maybe it was what UCF couldn't do in the semis, and then they get by Cincinnati.
Yeah, well, once a team's in the finals, it was class. And they were betting against SMU because SMU doesn't have any depth. And once you make that final game, it's not about depth. The adrenaline takes over. It's about winning a championship, and SMU was certainly the class of that field in the AAC on Sunday.
Big game breakdown up next, and the deep dive, the early action on the tournament on SportsBIT. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.
Go to SBROdds.com. Browse, compare, and shop live odds available at top online sportsbooks.
Back on SportsBIT, Betting Insight today. Time for big game breakdown. As always, live odds, sportsbookreview.com. Game number 1, Bucks and the Grizzlies. Memphis at home, 201.5 the total. They're taking some under money here in this one. Fizdale may have pushed the panic button way too early. Memphis opened 36-25. Might have been overachieving to get there. Back-to-back losses to Dallas and Houston. Then Fizdale made major lineup changes, Teddy. What's that all about?
Yeah, well, it started against the Nets. All right, he took Tony Allen and JaMychal Green out of the starting lineup and put Andrew Harrison and Brandon Wright in. Well, since those changes, the Memphis Grizzlies are 0-3 straight up, 0-3 against the spread, and they lost to the spread by 65.5 points. Their last 3 straight games, they lost in double figures at home as chalk, which is definitely something that you have to be concerned about. Here's what Fizdale said after the loss versus the Nets. That was the first with the new lineup. Quote, "We're stale. Right now we're 14-14 since January 1st. It's my job to shake it up. There were some good things about it, and overall, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who was on the floor for us. We couldn't guard them off the dribble. That's the bottom line. Well, you're 14-14, you lose at home to Brooklyn. It's supposed to get better than that, but it hasn't."
What's the line from Pulp Fiction? If my answers scare you, if my answers frighten you, stop asking scary questions. Well, here's Conley about after the game, quote, he asked for our opinion, and we said, do whatever's best, whatever you feel. We're trying to win. I thought guys handled it as good as they could. It was a shock for a lot of people involved in it. We maybe let that distract us a little bit. We're frustrated. We understand we're trying to build towards, and that's what's frustrating. If we didn't care about what was going on, if we didn't care about winning a championship, if we didn't think we were capable, then morale would be fine. We've got a lot of competitors in here, end quote. Shifted again against Atlanta. Harrison Wright back out. Allen back in. Ennis in. Never in the game. Down 33-15 after the first quarter. Trailed by as many as 26. Come on.
Well, that's just it. You switch, and then you try to switch back. You know, you got Tony Allen in. Now you have James Ennis in the starting lineup. Harrison's out. Wright's out. It's a little bit of a concern right now with David Fizdale. Here's his quote after Saturday's loss. We're just bad right now, and for whatever reason, we can't get it together. Mike Conley's quote after Saturday's loss. We're in our own heads right now. Individually, we're hesitant and we're doubting ourselves. We have to look in the mirror and figure out what we can do to be better individually and as a team. We have to get this thing in the right direction and not let go of the rope. Of course, it's a squad now that's lost 7 of their last 9. And you look at why? Their defense has completely collapsed. Look at the graphic. Memphis defense before the break, number 4 in the NBA. Since the All-Star break, the Memphis Grizzlies have the single worst defense in the NBA. That's nothing I'm able to say I don't even know how long. They've been always a real good defensive team. Not lately.
All right, here's your club. The Bucks, the other end of the spectrum, 6-0 straight up an ATS run. A game ahead of Miami for the 8th seed in the East. Starts with defense. Held opponents under 100 points each of the last 5 games. They're also buying in on offense because they're winning. Did not have anyone reach 20 in the 102-95 win over Minnesota. 7 players scored in double digits. The offense struggled early. The D kept them in the game. Jason Kidd, quote, nobody quit when things weren't going well for us there on the offensive end. The guys stuck together, played defense, came up with big stops. The trust level's extremely high, but now we have to keep that going on the road, end quote. Middleton back before the All-Star break. Look at this defense, Teddy.
Exactly. You know, they're sitting there pre-All-Star break, below average, ranked number 21 in the NBA. Since the All-Star break, they're they're number 7, top quartile in the NBA. And some of that's Chris Middleton in. Maybe some of that is Jabari Parker out. I wonder if that Parker injury has actually been a blessing for this year's Bucks team. They've been better since he got hurt.
Last game, live odds, sportsbookreview.com. Hawks and the Spurs, no line. Kawhi Leonard, concussion protocol. Good news for the Spurs, only half a game behind the Warriors for the top seed in the West. Stole a win over the Warriors Saturday night. No Leonard, Aldridge, and Parker, but Golden State took the night off. But the big story here, when does Aldridge come back?
Nobody knows. Greg Popovich doesn't know. I don't think anybody knows. Here's Pop's quote. You just think more seriously. When somebody says heart, you start thinking a little more possible long-term stuff. That's a little scary. But you don't go there yet. They're doing some tests. They did some tests today. They're going to continue with it on Monday. He's going to see some people on Monday, and based on what they do and see, we'll know better what we are really looking at. But we don't know right now. Now, there's a good chance that Kawhi will be back tonight. He's, as you mentioned, in the concussion protocol. Parker, very much a question mark for this evening. But until we have issues on status on Kawhi and Tony Parker, we're not going to see a lineup on this ballgame. That's why there's no overnight line or total for Hawks versus Spurs.
So the Hawks are only 4 games out of the 2 seed in the East. I can't call them contenders because they're not consistent and they can't put together anything in terms of a winning streak. Where are you at with the Hawks?
Well, I mean, I'm with you, and I have to look at Atlanta in the pretender category, despite the fact they're only 4 games out of the 2 seed in the East. That being said, for this particular game, they're set up pretty well. They gave Dwight Howard the night off against Memphis on Saturday. They rolled over the Grizzlies anyway. Paul Millsap had a double-double and 6 assists. He's really been an all-star since the All-Star game. 21 points, 8 boards, 4.5 assists per game here in March. So here's a Hawks team that hadn't played since Saturday. Then 2 days off after this. then home games against Memphis and Portland. So they do now have an opportunity perhaps to put a decent run together, something that Atlanta struggled to do for the better part of the campaign.
All right, up next, the deep dive in the play of the day. Where's the money coming in early on these March Madness games on SportsBIT? Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.
Research before you bet. Be sure to check out SBR Picks for the best game predictions, breakdowns, and much, much more.
Wrapping it up on SportsBIT Betting Insight today. Tomorrow we go over all 4 regions, sleepers, and who could go out early. All that coming up on, and some of the play-in games on Tuesday's show. Look for that on SportsBIT. Can't wait. Deep dive, early money on the tournament. Let's start with USC. Pick them up to 1 against Providence. A rematch from last year. They're playing the revenge angle, Teddy.
Yeah, I don't know if they're playing the revenge angle or the fact that they think USC's better this time around, which they probably are compared to a season ago. That being said, Ed Cooley, you remember the game last year? Providence kind of stole it at the end. And Ed Cooley's teams, they find a way to do that more often than your average team. That USC money, not coming out of my pocket, let's put it that way.
All right, this surprised me. A little Wisconsin money against Virginia Tech.
Yeah, Badgers opened 4.5, 5. Now we're looking at 5.5 and 6 against the Hokies. And again, we're talking about 8, 9 seeds. This is not normal. This is not your average 8, 9 seed type of point spread. But the Badgers, after that impressive run through the Big Ten tourney, and remember, they took money, as we talked about earlier in the show, in the Big Ten championship game. The markets viewing Wisconsin as a team that has regained their mojo after a late season slump. Hence, the Badgers money in this one.
I agree with this. Princeton money bet down from 7.5 to 6.5 against Notre Dame. And Princeton, hell of a team. They got bigs. Strange for an Ivy League team, but they have bigs. They can shoot the 3. And their guard shoots 90% from the free throw line.
Yeah, and the broader market's still at Princeton +7 as we record this. So the 6.5s are really starting to pop up at the leading indicator books against Notre Dame. And of course, there's some anti-Fighting Irish in this money as well. Notre Dame, the type of team that bettors seem to like as a dog, not so much as a favorite.
This will be an interesting game. Should be crazy, up-tempo, Gulf Coast against Florida State in Orlando. And they're taking Gulf Coast early.
Yeah, a little bit. +12 down to +11.5. You know, some books hoping Florida State as high as 14, and they got popped right away with Gulf Coast money. But this will be fun down in Florida as well. So there'll be a vocal crowd, and what has the potential to be a real track meet. I'm interested to see the total on this game.
Yes, I like this move too. Vermont +9 down to 8 against Purdue. I don't want Matt Painter in a big game. Remember they lost last year to Little Rock in the first round? Vermont, the longest winning streak in the country.
Yeah, and of course you were talking about the trend that favors Vermont and Princeton, not only to cover the point spread, but to actually win that game in straight-up fashion. If you missed the trend, check it out from earlier in the show.
I don't agree with this move. Michigan bet up from 1 to 2 against Okie State. I think these teams that have a big run in the conference tournament fade material.
Sure, the Wolverines are your classic team that did it all last weekend and may have shot their wad heading into the big dance. And Okie State, a team that didn't do anything last weekend, but a team that's supremely talented. That being said, Bayline's endgame, yeah, I can understand why the money came on Michigan. The markets are aware that teams like Michigan don't tend to do particularly well opening weekend. But when you talk about an endgame coach, Bayline's really good, and he showed it again this past weekend. It's hard to bet against Michigan in this type of point spread range as much as you want to bet against Michigan.
They're betting Larinaga against Izzo in March. Going against Izzo. Miami money, bet up from 1 to 2 against Sparty, and a little Dayton money against Wichita.
Yeah, we're seeing disrespect, even though Wichita, as the 10 seed, opened as 6.5 point favorites against the 7 seed Dayton. We're showing market disrespect for Wichita. There was a big move, a broad move across the market towards the Flyers. Dayton bet to 6. And, Sparty is what they are. We've seen them enough this year to know when you have that many losses for a Michigan State team, when you get bounced in the Big Ten tournament the way they did, not a lot of respect right now in the markets for an Izzo coach. Well, whatever. As a conference, the Big Ten hasn't won a title in, 15, 16 years. It's not like it's a conference that, of the 5 power conferences, the market's telling us very clearly the Big Ten's the worst of the 5.
All right, I'll call this a Dan Dockett special. He was on ESPN last night. He thinks UCLA destroys Kent State. Little UCLA money.
And I personally agree with that move wholeheartedly. It is a tough matchup for Kent, and UCLA has the potential to put the biscuit in the basket the way few teams can. UCLA minus 17 to minus 18. I do expect that line will go higher.
All right, very good last week. Some interesting stuff. We said Kentucky would win the SEC. We said Villanova would win the Big East. Wrong about Duke. Way off on Duke, but and Teddy's call on Michigan too. So excellent job last week with the conference tourneys. Money time, play of the day. Where are we going?
Let's go to the NBA. One of the games we talked about tonight. We got Chris Middleton back, and the Bucks. They're dead serious about making a run to the playoffs. Memphis talking the talk. I'm not convinced they're going to walk the walk. Give me 507 Milwaukee Bucks plus the 4. That's our play of the day.
All right, tomorrow, can't wait. We preview all 4 regions and a couple of the play-in games, and then we'll get to the first round the rest of the week. Coming up on sportsBIT. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.